The crystal chandelier above table 17 cast dancing shadows across the white linen tablecloth as Marcus Chun raised his champagne glass. It was their 10th wedding anniversary, and he had chosen the most expensive restaurant in the city for this occasion. The kind of place where reservations required 3 months advance notice and a single bottle of wine could cost more than most people's monthly rent. Sophia sat across from him, wearing the emerald dress he had picked out that morning, her dark hair swept up in an elegant twist that had taken her stylist 2 hours to perfect. Around them, the restaurant hummed with the quiet conversations of the wealthy and powerful. Tech moguls discussing their latest acquisitions. Real estate developers planning their next skyscraper. Politicians dining with donors whose contributions came with very specific expectations. This was Marcus's world now, so different from the cramped pizza parlor where they had celebrated their first anniversary 12 years ago. Marcus stood, and the conversations at nearby tables quieted. People recognized him. Marcus Chen, the boy genius who had built an artificial intelligence company worth $3.2 billion. The man whose face had graced the covers of Fortune, Forbes, and Time magazine. The entrepreneur who had revolutionized machine learning and made himself obscenely wealthy in the process. 10 years, Marcus began, his voice carrying across the hushed restaurant. Sophia smiled up at him, expecting the kind of loving toast she had heard him give at charity galas and investor dinners. He was good at speeches, at saying exactly what people wanted to hear. 10 years of what everyone thinks is a perfect marriage. Something in his tone made Sophia's smile falter slightly. There was an edge there. Something cold and calculated that didn't belong in an anniversary toast. But I need to be honest tonight, Marcus continued, and now his voice was rising, drawing attention from every corner of the restaurant. You've disgusted me since day one, Sophia. This marriage was the worst investment I ever made. The words hung in the air like shards of broken glass. Conversations stopped entirely. Waiters froze mid-step. Even the pianist in the corner seemed to miss a note. Sophia sat perfectly still, her champagne glass halfway to her lips, processing what she had just heard. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He dropped it on the table between them with a heavy thud that seemed to echo in the silence. Divorce papers. Already signed by me. My lawyer will contact yours tomorrow morning to discuss the terms. That was when Sophia did something that no one expected. She smiled. Not a sad smile, not a shocked smile, but a knowing smile. The kind of smile that suggested she had just won something rather than lost everything. The restaurant doors opened, and a woman walked in. She was young, mid-20s perhaps, with the kind of aggressive beauty that came from expensive procedures and designer clothes chosen specifically to intimidate. Her heels clicked across the marble floor as she approached table 17 with the confidence of someone who believed she had already won. This is Jade, Marcus announced to the watching restaurant, to his humiliated wife, to the world. My chief of staff. We've been together for over a year. She understands ambition in a way you never could. Jade slipped her arm through Marcus's possessively, her diamond bracelet catching the light. A bracelet Sophia recognized from a credit card statement she had seen 6 months ago. $47,000 for a piece of jewelry she had never received. Sophia picked up the envelope, opened it calmly, and pulled out the divorce papers. She didn't read them, didn't study the terms that Marcus's team of lawyers had spent weeks crafting to minimize his financial exposure. She simply signed her name at the bottom in smooth, elegant script. I'll have my lawyer contact yours, she said, her voice steady and clear. Then she stood, gathered her clutch purse, and walked out of the restaurant with her head held high. Behind her, she could hear the whispers starting, the shocked conversations about what they had just witnessed, the public destruction of a marriage, the humiliation of a woman who had spent 10 years supporting her husband's ambitions. What none of them knew, what Marcus and Jade couldn't possibly have suspected, was that Sophia's lawyer had filed divorce papers that very morning, 12 hours before Marcus's theatrical announcement, 12 hours before his attempt to blindside her and control the narrative. And those papers included something that would change everything: evidence. Mountains of evidence that Sophia had been gathering for 18 months. Evidence that would transform Marcus's moment of triumph into the beginning of his complete destruction. But to understand how Sophia had gotten to this point, we need to go back. Back to when she was still naive enough to believe in love. Back to when Marcus Chun was just a passionate programmer with a dream and a smile that made her believe anything was possible. 12 years ago, Sophia Martinez had been establishing herself as an art curator at a prestigious gallery in downtown San Francisco. She had a degree from NYU, an eye for emerging artists, and a reputation for discovering talent before anyone else recognized it. Her gallery openings were events, places where tech money met creative vision, where innovation in art paralleled innovation in technology. That was where she met Marcus. He had wandered into one of her exhibitions, not because he cared about art, but because he had read that venture capitalists often attended gallery openings looking for the next big thing. He was 26, running his first startup from a tiny apartment in a questionable neighborhood, living on ramen noodles and ambition. Sophia had noticed him immediately. Not because he was handsome, though he was in that intense way of young entrepreneurs who slept 4 hours a night and dreamed in code, but because of the way he looked at the paintings. He wasn't pretending to understand them or nodding along with the pretentious analysis that gallery-goers often affected. He was genuinely trying to see the patterns, to understand the structure beneath the creativity. "You're looking at it like an equation," she had said, approaching him with 2 glasses of wine. Marcus had turned to her, startled. "Is that wrong?" "Not at all. Actually, it's refreshing." She handed him a glass. "Most people look at art and see what they're supposed to see. You're looking at it and trying to understand how it works." They had talked for 3 hours that night. He told her about his company, about his vision for artificial intelligence that could learn and adapt like human cognition. She told him about her artists, about the way creativity and innovation were really the same impulse expressed through different mediums. By the end of the evening, Marcus had asked for her number, and Sophia had given it to him while thinking that this intense young programmer might actually be someone special. Their first date was in his apartment because Marcus couldn't afford the kind of restaurants Sophia was used to from her gallery events. He ordered pizza and apologized for the mess, for the laptop cords everywhere, for the whiteboards covered in incomprehensible algorithms. But Sophia loved it. She loved his passion, his vision, his absolute certainty that he was going to change the world. "You see the world in patterns," she told him that night, watching him explain his latest breakthrough with an intensity that made his eyes light up. "I see it in colors and emotions. Together, we could see everything." Marcus had kissed her then, and in that moment, Sophia believed she had found her partner. Not just a boyfriend, but someone who would build a life alongside her. Someone whose ambition matched hers, whose dreams complemented her own. The first 3 years were extraordinary. Marcus's company began to attract serious investor attention. His artificial intelligence platform was revolutionary, solving problems that other companies hadn't even figured out how to ask yet. Money started flowing in, first hundreds of thousands, then millions, then tens of millions. Sophia supported him through every sleepless night, every failed pitch, every breakthrough and setback. She networked with her gallery connections to introduce him to potential investors. She managed his schedule when he forgot to eat or sleep. She believed in him completely, even when he doubted himself. When his company finally went public, Marcus became a billionaire overnight. At 29 years old, he was worth more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. And Sophia was there beside him, celebrating not because of the money, but because the man she loved had achieved his impossible dream. That was when things began to change. Success brought new people into Marcus's orbit. Other tech billionaires who saw the world as a game they were winning. Business consultants who taught him how to optimize every aspect of life for maximum efficiency. Executive coaches who told him that his wife's middle-class background might be holding him back from truly elite circles. "You should think about your image," one of his new advisors told him at a networking event Sophia wasn't invited to. "Your wife is lovely, but is she the kind of partner who represents where you're going, or where you've been?" The comments started small. Suggestions about her wardrobe that felt like criticism. Questions about why she was still working at the gallery when his income made it unnecessary. hints that successful men's wives focused on supporting their husbands' brands rather than pursuing their own careers. "I'm thinking you should step back from the gallery," Marcus said one evening over dinner in their new penthouse apartment. They had moved from his cramped studio to a place with a view of the entire city, a place where the monthly maintenance fees exceeded what Sophia used to make in a year. "Step back? Marcus, I'm about to curate the biggest exhibition of my career." "I know, and that's great. But I need you more now. The company is expanding internationally. I need a partner who can host investor dinners, travel with me to conferences, represent us properly in social situations." Not him. As if she had become an extension of his brand rather than a person with her own identity. Sophia had compromised. She moved from full-time to consulting at the gallery, telling herself it was temporary. That once Marcus's company stabilized, she could return to the work she loved. That supporting your partner's dreams was what you did in a marriage. Then she got pregnant. Twins. The pregnancy was unexpected but not unwelcome. Marcus seemed thrilled initially, talking about how their children would grow up with every advantage, how they would attend the best schools, have access to opportunities he had never imagined as a kid growing up in a working-class immigrant family. But as Sophia's body changed, as pregnancy made her tired and emotional, as morning sickness kept her from the networking events and charity galas, Marcus's enthusiasm cooled. The comments became more pointed. "You've let yourself go a bit, haven't you?" he said one morning, looking at her pregnant body with something like distaste. "Marcus, I'm 6 months pregnant with twins." "I know. I'm just saying some women manage to stay in shape during pregnancy. It's about discipline." After Emma and Lucas were born, the criticism intensified. Sophia was exhausted from night feedings, from managing 2 infants who seemed to take turns crying, from trying to be the perfect mother while maintaining the perfect home while supporting her husband's ever-expanding empire. "I need you to get back to your pre-pregnancy weight," Marcus told her when the twins were 3 months old. "We have the Tech Industry Awards in 2 months, and I need you looking your best." "Marcus, I'm barely sleeping. I'm nursing 2 babies. My body is—" "Your body is a reflection on me," he interrupted. "Everything about you is a reflection on me now. Do you understand that?" She should have left then. That was the moment when Sophia should have recognized that the man she married had become someone else entirely. Someone who saw her not as a partner but as an asset to be managed and optimized like everything else in his life. But she stayed. She hired a trainer and lost the weight. She got the cosmetic procedures Marcus suggested. She attended the award ceremony in a dress that cost more than her parents' car, smiling for cameras while Marcus accepted accolades for his brilliance, never mentioning the wife at home with his children, the woman who had believed in him when he had nothing. The gaslighting was subtle at first. Marcus would tell stories about their early relationship that differed slightly from Sophia's memory. He would claim she had agreed to things she hadn't. He would rewrite their history in small ways that made her question her own recollection of events. "Remember when we met?" he said once at a dinner party full of tech executives and their trophy wives. Sophia was working at this little gallery, barely making ends meet. "I used to joke that I rescued her from a life of poverty." It wasn't true. Sophia had been successful in her own right, making a good living doing work she loved. But the way Marcus told it, she had been desperate and he had been her savior. And because he told this version of events repeatedly, in front of people who had no reason to question him, it began to feel like the truth. The emotional abuse escalated over the following years. Marcus controlled every aspect of their lives. He decided where they lived, how they decorated, which schools the children attended, who they socialized with. He managed Sophia's spending with an app on his phone, requiring her to submit requests for purchases over $500. "Every dollar in this family comes from my work," he reminded her constantly. "I think I have a right to know how it's being spent." When Sophia tried to push back, tried to assert any independence, Marcus had an arsenal of responses designed to make her feel small. "You're being emotional again. This is why women shouldn't make financial decisions. I'm the reason you have this life. A little gratitude would be appropriate. Your art career was a joke. I saved you from failure." The worst part was that Marcus was charming in public. At charity events, he was the devoted husband, praising Sophia's contributions to their success. At school functions, he was the engaged father, talking about Emma and Lucas's accomplishments. To the outside world, they were the perfect family. Successful, wealthy, happy. Only Sophia knew the truth. Only she heard what he said behind closed doors. Only she felt the slow erosion of her self-worth under the constant criticism and control. Then, 18 months ago, Jade Martinez joined Marcus's company as his chief of staff. She was 24, ambitious, beautiful in that calculated way of women who understood that appearance was currency in certain circles. She had graduated from an Ivy League business school and had that predatory confidence that came from knowing she could get what she wanted through manipulation. Sophia noticed changes in Marcus almost immediately. He started paying more attention to his appearance, getting expensive haircuts every week instead of every month. He bought new cologne, updated his entire wardrobe, started going to the gym before work. "Just trying to stay healthy," he said when Sophia commented on it. "At my level, you have to project vitality." But there were other signs. Late nights at the office that became overnight business trips. Secretive phone calls taken in other rooms. Credit card charges for restaurants and hotels that Marcus never mentioned. And that $47,000 diamond bracelet that Sophia had discovered on a statement, a bracelet she had never received. When she confronted him, Marcus's response was immediate and vicious. "You think I'm having an affair? That's what your paranoid, pathetic mind comes up with." His voice dripped with contempt. "Maybe if you brought something to this marriage besides insecurity and complaints, I wouldn't need to spend so much time at work." "Marcus, I saw the receipt. Who did you buy a $50,000 bracelet for?" "That's none of your business. It was a business gift." Some of us understand that building relationships requires investment. But you wouldn't know anything about that, would you? You haven't contributed to the business side of our life in years. Sophia could have accepted the lie. She could have swallowed her suspicions and continued playing the role of the obedient wife. Many women in her position did exactly that, choosing the comfort of denial over the chaos of truth. But something in her refused. Maybe it was the years of criticism finally building to a breaking point. Maybe it was watching her children grow up in a home where their father treated their mother with contempt. Maybe it was the memory of who she used to be before she met Marcus, the confident curator who trusted her own judgment. Whatever it was, Sophia made a decision that night. She wasn't going to confront Marcus again. She wasn't going to give him another opportunity to gaslight her, to make her feel crazy for noticing obvious red flags. Instead, she was going to investigate. She was going to gather evidence. And she was going to protect herself and her children from whatever was coming. The next morning, Sophia called Diana Torres, a lawyer she had known in college who had specialized in high-stakes divorce cases. They met for coffee at a place across town where no one from Marcus's world would recognize them. "I think my husband is having an affair," Sophia said without preamble. "And I think he's planning to leave me." Diana studied her for a long moment. She had handled enough cases involving wealthy men to recognize the signs. "What makes you think he's planning to leave?" "The way he talks about me, like I'm a burden he's preparing to shed. He's meticulous, Diana. He doesn't do anything without planning it obsessively. If he's having an affair, he's also planning his exit strategy. Men like your husband don't leave their wives without protecting their assets first," Diana said carefully. "If you're right about this, he's probably been hiding money for months, maybe years." That was when Sophia understood the full scope of what she was facing. This wasn't just about infidelity. This was about Marcus systematically preparing to destroy her while she remained oblivious, trusting, playing the role of devoted wife while he plotted her elimination from his life. "I need to know everything," Sophia said. "Everything he's doing, everyone he's seeing, every dollar he's hiding. Before he knows I know." Diana nodded slowly. "This kind of investigation isn't cheap. We're talking private investigators, forensic accountants, tech specialists. Easily $500,000. Sophia thought about her grandmother's inheritance, Money she had kept in a separate account that Marcus didn't know about. Money she had saved thinking she might use it to restart her gallery career someday. I have it. Over the next few weeks, Diana assembled a team. A private investigator named James Chin who specialized in infidelity cases and financial fraud. A forensic accountant named Rebecca Walsh who could trace money through the most complicated corporate structures. And, ironically, a tech security specialist named David Park who was actually better at digital surveillance than Marcus's entire cybersecurity team. Your husband made a mistake, David told Sophia during their first meeting. He's brilliant with AI and machine learning, but he's complacent about basic operational security. He uses the same passwords across multiple platforms. He doesn't encrypt his personal devices. He thinks because he's the tech genius, he's automatically protected. They started with the obvious, following Marcus and documenting his relationship with Jade. That part was almost too easy. Marcus and Jade weren't even particularly careful. They met at luxury hotels registered under Marcus's real name. They had dinner at expensive restaurants where they were frequently photographed by society photographers. They took trips together to business conferences that were obviously romantic getaways. James came back with photographs that made Sophia's stomach turn. Not because she still loved Marcus, that feeling had died slowly over years of emotional abuse, but because of how brazen it was. How little Marcus cared about being caught. How confident he was that Sophia was too beaten down, too dependent, too afraid to do anything about it. But the affair was just the beginning. The real revelation came when Rebecca started digging into Marcus's financial records. Sophia, this is bigger than I expected, Rebecca said during one of their weekly briefings. Your husband has been systematically moving assets out of reach for at least 2 years. Maybe longer. How much are we talking about? Rebecca pulled up a spreadsheet on her laptop. So far, I've traced $780 million. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Singapore. Shell companies in Delaware and Nevada. Properties purchased under LLCs registered in Jade's name or under corporate entities that are 6 levels removed from Marcus's control. Sophia felt dizzy. $780 million. That wasn't just protecting assets. That was theft. That was systematically stealing from their marital estate while pretending everything was normal. There's more, Rebecca continued. He's been restructuring his ownership in the company, moving shares to trusts designed to make it look like his net worth is significantly lower than it actually is. If you had filed for divorce without knowing this, his lawyers would have claimed he's only worth about $800 million. You would have gotten $400 million in the settlement, thinking that was fair, while he actually had access to over $2 billion. Can we prove all of this? Every single transaction. And here's the beautiful part. Your husband is so confident in his own intelligence that he's been sloppy. He's documented everything. Emails to his financial advisors. Text messages to Jade about the strategy. Voice memos to himself planning the whole scheme. He created the evidence trail himself. But the worst discovery came from David's monitoring of Marcus's devices. Because Marcus wasn't just hiding money and having an affair. He was planning something far more sinister. A complete character assassination of Sophia designed to minimize his custody obligations and destroy her credibility in court. You need to hear this? David said, his face grim as he pulled up an audio file. This is from a conversation Marcus had with his personal attorney 3 weeks ago. Marcus's voice filled the room, casual and cold. The custody situation is the biggest financial risk. Child support on my real net worth could be massive. We need to establish that Sophia is an unfit mother. The attorney's voice responded, That's going to be difficult. By all accounts, she's devoted to those kids. Then we create accounts that say something different. She has a drinking problem. She's emotionally unstable. She neglects the children. We hire witnesses if we need to. We build a narrative. Listening to her husband plot to destroy her relationship with her own children. Sophia felt something break inside her. Not her spirit, not her resolve, but the last remaining piece of sentiment. The last tiny hope that somewhere inside Marcus Chun was still the man she had married. That man was gone. Or maybe he had never existed. Maybe Marcus had always been this person, this calculating sociopath who saw even his own children as financial liabilities to be minimized. "There's one more thing you should know," David said, pulling up another file. "About Jade." James had done a deep background investigation on Jade Martinez, and what he found was stunning. This wasn't her first relationship with a married executive. It was her third. "She has a pattern," James explained, spreading out documents across the conference table. First target was a tech executive in Silicon Valley. Affair lasted 2 years, ended in divorce. He gave her a $5 million settlement to go away quietly. Second target was a real estate mogul in New York. Same pattern, but bigger payout. $7 million and a penthouse apartment. "She's a professional," Sophia said, understanding dawning. "Exactly. She researches wealthy married men, gets jobs in their companies, systematically seduces them, and coaches them through divorces designed to maximize her eventual payout. And she's not working alone." David pulled up emails between Jade and someone named Harrison Webb. Webb runs what he calls a relationship consulting business. Basically, he coaches women on how to extract maximum value from affairs with wealthy men. He tells them which lawyers to recommend, how to manipulate the men into making bad decisions, how to position themselves for the biggest possible settlement. In one email, Jade had written to Webb, "Target is ready to file for divorce. Net worth is higher than expected," advising him to deny paternity of children to minimize support obligations. "Should position me for at least $20 million in final settlement." Webb's response, "Perfect. Remember, you need to make him feel like the victim while isolating him from any competent advisors. The more emotionally dependent he becomes, the more generous he'll be when you finally exit." Sophia sat back in her chair, processing all of it. Her husband was a monster. His mistress was a con artist. Together they were plotting to destroy her, take her children, and steal her financial security. They thought she was weak. They thought she was beaten down. They thought she would accept whatever crumbs they chose to throw her. They had no idea what was coming. "Diana," Sophia said, her voice absolutely calm, "I want to file first. Before Marcus has any idea I know about any of this. I want to hit him with everything at once. Every hidden account, every lie, every piece of evidence. I want to destroy him completely." Diana smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a lawyer who loved her job. "Then let's go to war." The paperwork took 2 weeks to prepare. It was a masterpiece of legal documentation, a comprehensive filing that laid out Marcus's infidelity, his financial fraud, his conspiracy to fabricate evidence against Sophia, Jade's history of targeting wealthy men, and the complete network of hidden assets. "This isn't just a divorce filing," Diana explained. "This is a criminal referral. The kind of financial fraud Marcus has committed is prosecutable. The DA's office is going to be very interested in this case." They filed on a Thursday morning. By law, divorce filings in their state were public record. By noon, reporters who monitored these filings for high-profile cases had found it. By evening, the story was everywhere. Tech billionaire Marcus Chen's marriage implodes. Wife alleges affair, hidden assets, and conspiracy. That evening, Marcus made his reservation at the city's most expensive restaurant. He planned his theatrical public humiliation of his wife, his grand gesture of control. He had no idea that Sophia had filed first, that evidence of his crimes was already in the hands of journalists and prosecutors, that his carefully constructed plan was already collapsing around him. So when Marcus stood up at that anniversary dinner and delivered his devastating speech, when he threw divorce papers on the table expecting to see Sophia broken and desperate, he couldn't understand why she smiled. She smiled because she had won before the game even started. She smiled because Marcus, in his arrogance, had underestimated the woman he had spent years trying to destroy. She smiled because justice was coming, and Marcus Chun was about to learn that there were some people you should never underestimate. The morning after the restaurant humiliation, Marcus woke up to catastrophe. His phone was flooded with notifications. News alerts, messages from board members, calls from his attorney. The story was everywhere, And it wasn't the story he had planned. Tech billionaire accused of hiding $780 million in divorce scheme. Marcus Chen's mistress revealed as serial corporate climber, with history of targeting married executives. Fraud allegations rock AI giant's leadership. His board called an emergency meeting. Investors were concerned about his judgment. Several major clients were threatening to pause their contracts pending the outcome of the legal proceedings. Marcus's carefully cultivated image as a visionary leader was evaporating in real time. And Jade? She stopped answering his calls immediately. She had seen enough of these situations to know when to abandon ship. Marcus was no longer a rising tide that would lift her to new wealth. He was a sinking ship that would pull everyone down with him. Marcus hired Preston Vale, one of the most expensive and ruthless divorce attorneys in the country. Vale was known for protecting wealthy men's assets through aggressive litigation and character assassination of their wives. But when Vale reviewed the evidence Sophia's team had compiled, even his legendary confidence wavered. Marcus, this is bad. She has you on tape discussing the custody strategy. She has financial records of every hidden asset. She has your mistress's history documented. She has your text messages planning the whole thing. I don't care what it costs, Marcus said, his voice tight with rage. Destroy her. Make her regret ever thinking she could challenge me. Vale looked at his client and knew with absolute certainty that this was a losing case. But at $1,500 an hour, he was willing to try. The trial began 6 weeks later. The courtroom was packed with reporters, tech industry observers, and people who had followed the case obsessively online. This was more than just a divorce. It was a morality play about wealth, power, and consequences. Marcus took the stand first, still confident despite everything. He testified that Sophia had been a gold digger from the beginning, that she had contributed nothing to his success, that she was an unstable mother who prioritized her own desires over their children's welfare. Then Diana Torres stood up to cross-examine him, and Marcus's confidence began to crack. Mr. Chun, you testified that your wife contributed nothing to your success. Is it true that she introduced you to the venture capitalist who provided your series of funding? Well, yes, but... And is it true that she managed your schedule, your household, and your children while you built your company? That's what wives do. Is it also true that you told multiple business associates that your wife was your secret weapon in building relationships with investors? Marcus had no answer for that. Every piece of his narrative was being systematically dismantled. Then Diana played the audio recording. Marcus's voice filled the courtroom, cold and calculating. The kids are just leverage. Once I prove she's crazy, I can minimize custody and child support. The reaction was immediate. Gasps from the gallery, furious note-taking from reporters, and most importantly, a look of absolute disgust on the judge's face. Judge Catherine Morrison had been on the bench for 30 years. She had presided over hundreds of divorces, many involving wealthy men who tried to cheat their wives. But this level of calculated cruelty, this systematic plan to destroy a mother's relationship with her children for purely financial reasons, was something that made even her hardened judicial demeanor crack. When the forensic accountant took the stand and walked through every hidden asset, every shell company, every fraudulent transfer, the case was essentially over. Marcus had been caught in a lie so massive, so thoroughly documented, that no amount of expensive lawyering could save him. The trial lasted 3 days. The verdict took Judge Morrison 20 minutes to deliver, and it was devastating. Mr. Chan, she began, her voice cold with controlled anger. In 30 years on this bench, I have rarely encountered such a systematic attempt to defraud not just your spouse, but this court and the legal system itself. You attempted to hide $780 million in marital assets. You conspired with your mistress to fabricate evidence of your wife's unfitness as a mother. You lied under oath repeatedly. Marcus sat frozen as the judge continued. This court awards full physical custody of Emma and Lucas Chun to their mother, Sophia Martinez Chun. Mr. Chun will have supervised visitation pending completion of court-mandated therapy. The court finds that the defendant has hidden substantial marital assets through fraud and awards 60% of all marital property to the plaintiff. That comes to approximately $1.4 billion. The number echoed through the courtroom. $1.4 billion. The largest divorce settlement in state history. Additionally, the defendant will pay alimony in the amount of $15 million annually for 15 years, child support of $100,000 monthly per child, and all legal fees associated with this case, which currently total $3.2 million. But Judge Morrison wasn't finished. Finally, I am referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for prosecution of financial fraud. The systematic hiding of assets and conspiracy to commit perjury that this court has witnessed constitute criminal offenses that warrant investigation. Marcus's face had gone from white to gray. In less than a week, he had gone from confident billionaire planning his perfect exit to a man facing financial ruin and potential criminal prosecution. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Marcus's board of directors removed him as CEO, citing concerns about his judgment and the legal liability he represented. The company's stock dropped 23%. Federal investigators opened an inquiry into whether he had used similar fraudulent techniques in his business dealings. Jade Martinez was indicted 3 months later for conspiracy to commit fraud. Prosecutors had found evidence of her involvement in 2 previous cases that followed the exact same pattern. She eventually pled guilty and received a 3-year prison sentence. Harrison Webb, her relationship consultant, was also indicted. His business of coaching women to manipulate wealthy men into disadvantageous divorces crossed the line from unethical to illegal. He faced up to 10 years in prison. But this story isn't really about Marcus's fall or Jade's prosecution or even the massive financial settlement. It's about what Sophia did next. She could have simply taken the money and disappeared. She could have bought a mansion somewhere, lived off her settlement, and spent her days getting spa treatments and planning vacations. No one would have blamed her for choosing that life after what she had endured. Instead, Sophia started a foundation. The Martinez Foundation for Economic Justice helped women escape financially abusive relationships. It provided legal services, financial planning, job training, and support for women trying to rebuild their lives after divorce from wealthy, controlling partners. I had resources that most women in my situation don't have, Sophia told a reporter at the foundation's launch. I had family money to pay for investigators and lawyers. I had the education to understand my legal rights. Most women trapped in financially abusive marriages have none of that. They're isolated, financially dependent, terrified of ending up homeless or losing their children. The foundation helped over 1,200 women in its first year. Sophia also wrote a book called The Strategic Divorce, a practical guide for women planning to leave wealthy, controlling partners. It became a bestseller, not because people enjoyed reading about divorce, but because Sophia wrote with such clarity about the psychological patterns of financial abuse and the practical steps needed to escape it. But perhaps her greatest achievement was reopening her career as an art curator. Using part of her settlement, Sophia opened her own gallery in the same neighborhood where she had met Marcus 12 years earlier. The gallery specialized in emerging artists, particularly women artists who had been overlooked by the traditional art world. 1 year after the divorce was finalized, Sophia stood in her gallery at the opening of a major exhibition. Emma and Lucas ran around the space, older now, stable, thriving in their new life. They still saw their father during supervised visits, but they lived with Sophia in a beautiful home that she had chosen, not Marcus. A collector approached Sophia, admiring one of the paintings on display. This gallery is remarkable. The artists you've chosen, the way you've curated this show, is brilliant. How did you manage to fund something like this? Sophia smiled. Not the strategic smile she had worn at that anniversary dinner. Not the knowing smile that had confused Marcus so completely, but a genuine smile of someone who had survived something terrible and built something beautiful from the ashes. Let's just say I made a very good investment in myself, she replied, because that was the truth Marcus had never understood. Sophia wasn't the weak, dependent wife he had believed her to be. She was a brilliant, capable woman who had been systematically diminished by someone who needed her to be small so he could feel large. When Marcus made his mistake, when he underestimated her intelligence, her strength, her capacity for strategic thinking, He didn't just lose a legal case. He lost everything. His company, his reputation, his freedom, his children. And Sophia? She got everything she had always deserved. Financial security, yes. Justice, absolutely. But most importantly, she got her life back. She got to be the person she was before Marcus convinced her she was worthless. She got to show her children that their mother was strong, capable, and worthy of respect. Marcus Chun filed for bankruptcy 18 months after the divorce was finalized. The combination of the settlement, legal fees, fines from the fraud investigation, and the collapse of his company's value left him with almost nothing. The man who had once been worth over $3 billion was living in a modest apartment, working as a consultant for other tech companies, rebuilding from scratch. But this isn't a story about feeling sorry for Marcus Chin. He made his choices. Every lie, every betrayal, every calculated move to destroy the woman who had supported him, those were decisions he made with full awareness of what he was doing. The consequences he faced were entirely of his own making. Some people asked Sophia if she felt guilty about how completely Marcus's life had unraveled. The question always made her pause, not because she felt guilt, but because it revealed how little people understood about what she had endured. Do I feel guilty that a man who spent years emotionally abusing me, who had an affair while I raised his children, who hid hundreds of millions of dollars, who plotted to destroy my relationship with my own kids, who manufactured evidence to make me look like an unfit mother? Do I feel guilty that this man faced consequences for his actions? Sophia would respond, her voice calm but firm. No, I don't feel guilty at all. I feel like justice was served. The foundation grew. By its third year, it had helped over 4,000 women. Sophia hired a team of lawyers who specialized in high-net-worth divorces, particularly cases involving financial abuse and hidden assets. They took on cases pro bono for women who couldn't afford representation, and they won. Again and again and again. One of those women was named Catherine Lee. She had been married to a hedge fund manager who controlled every aspect of her life, who told her she was too stupid to understand money, who made her ask permission for every purchase. When Catherine came to the foundation, she was terrified, convinced she would end up homeless if she left her husband. Sophia sat with her in the foundation's office, in a room designed to feel safe and comfortable rather than intimidating. I know you're scared, Sophia told her. I was scared too. But fear is what men like your husband count on. They build entire systems of control based on making you believe you can't survive without them. But he's right, Catherine said, tears streaming down her face. I don't have any money of my own. I haven't worked in 10 years. I don't even know what our assets are. That's why we're going to find out. That's why we're going to document everything. That's why we're going to make sure that when you leave with everything you're entitled to. Sophia leaned forward. You know what my ex-husband used to tell me? That I disgusted him. That I had contributed nothing to his success. That I was lucky he even kept me around. Catherine looked up, surprised. She had read about Sophia's case, but hearing it spoken out loud, hearing the raw truth of those words, was different. And you know what I learned? Sophia continued. Men who say things like that are terrified. They're terrified that if you realize your own worth, you'll leave. They're terrified that if you understand your legal rights, they'll have to give up the control they've built. So they keep you scared, keep you dependent, keep you believing their lies. 6 months later, Catherine walked out of her own divorce hearing with full custody of her 2 children and a settlement of $43 million. Her ex-husband, who had spent years telling her she was worthless, discovered that the legal system disagreed with his assessment. This pattern repeated hundreds of times through the foundation's work. Women who had been told they were nothing, who had been financially abused and emotionally destroyed, who had been convinced they couldn't survive on their own, discovered that they were stronger than they had ever imagined. And more importantly, they discovered that there were consequences for the men who had abused them. The gallery thrived too. Sophia had an eye for talent that had only sharpened during her years away from the art world. She discovered artists who went on to show at major museums, whose work sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars, who credited Sophia with believing in them when no one else did. One of those artists was a young woman named Maya Rodriguez who painted portraits of women in positions of power. Not traditional power, not CEOs or politicians, but real power. Women protecting their children. Women starting over after devastating losses. Women standing up to systems designed to keep them down. Maya's breakout piece was a portrait of Sophia herself, painted from a photograph taken on the courthouse steps the day the divorce was finalized. In the painting, Sophia stood alone, briefcase in hand, looking directly at the viewer with an expression that was neither triumphant nor defeated, just strong, unbreakable. The painting sold for $250,000 at auction. The buyer was a tech executive's ex-wife who had used Sophia's book to plan her own escape from a financially abusive marriage. She hung the painting in her office as a reminder that survival was possible, that strength could be found even in the darkest moments. Emma and Lucas grew up knowing their mother's story. Not immediately. Sophia waited until they were old enough to understand the complexity of what had happened. But eventually, she told them the truth. Their father had made choices that hurt people. He had prioritized his own desires over his family's welfare. And their mother had protected them in the only way she could. "Are you mad at Dad?" Lucas asked when he was 12, old enough to understand the basics of what had happened but young enough to still want his parents to love each other. Sophia considered the question carefully. "I'm not mad anymore. Being angry takes energy, and I'd rather spend that energy on building something good. Your father made his choices. I made mine. And you and your sister are the best things that came from that marriage. So I can't regret it completely." "But he tried to say we weren't his kids," Emma said quietly. She was the more serious of the twins, the one who thought deeply about things. "He did. And that was cruel and wrong. But you know what? It backfired. Because when the DNA tests proved you were absolutely his children, it also proved he was willing to lie about his own kids for money. It showed everyone exactly who he was. The children processed this in their own ways. They maintained a relationship with Marcus, though it was complicated and sometimes painful. He had completed his court-mandated therapy and had, by all accounts, gained some insight into his own behavior. He paid his child support on time, showed up for his visitation days, and tried to be a better father than he had been a husband. But he would never be close to his children the way Sophia was. That bond had been broken by his own choices, and no amount of therapy or regret could fully repair it. On what would have been her 20th wedding anniversary, Sophia took Emma and Lucas to the coffee shop where she had first met their father. The place had been renovated several times over the years, but it was still recognizably the same space where a young curator and an ambitious programmer had fallen in love over discussions of art and algorithms. "This is where it started," she told them, ordering 3 coffees and finding a table by the window. "Your father and I sat right here, in this exact spot, and talked for 3 hours about our dreams." "Do you miss him?" Emma asked. "The version of him from back then?" Sophia thought about it. "Sometimes. But I think I miss the version of myself from back then more. The woman who believed in love without conditions, who trusted without fear. Marcus took that from me, and it took years to get it back." "But you did get it back," Lucas said. "It wasn't a question. I did, and I'm stronger for it. Not because of what happened, but because of how I chose to respond to it. Your father tried to destroy me, and instead I built something better than what we had. The foundation, the gallery, the book, the thousands of women helped. These were Sophia's legacy. Not revenge, though there was certainly justice in her story, but something more profound. The transformation of pain into purpose, of survival into strength, of personal tragedy into collective healing." 5 years after the divorce, Sophia was invited to speak at a conference for family law attorneys. The topic was financial abuse in high-net-worth marriages, and Sophia was considered the expert on the subject, both from personal experience and from the foundation's work. She stood at the podium looking out at hundreds of lawyers who specialized in divorce cases, who saw the wreckage of broken marriages every day, who understood intellectually what their clients faced, but couldn't always fully grasp the emotional reality. "When my ex-husband stood up in that restaurant and told me I had disgusted him since day one, he thought he was delivering a death blow," Sophia began. "He thought he was destroying me in the most public, humiliating way possible. He thought I would crumble, beg, accept whatever terms he dictated. The room was completely silent. He didn't understand that by that point, I had already won. I had already filed. I had already gathered every piece of evidence. I had already built my case. His moment of triumph was actually the moment his entire plan fell apart. Sophia paused, letting that sink in. But here's what I want you to understand. I could only do that because I had resources. I had inherited money to pay for investigators. I had a legal education that helped me understand my rights. I had friends who could connect me with the right attorneys. Most of your clients don't have those advantages. She clicked to the next slide, showing statistics about women who stay in financially abusive marriages because they can't afford to leave. The woman sitting in your office right now, terrified and broke, with 3 kids and no access to bank accounts. She's relying on you to be what I was fortunate enough to be for myself. Strategic, thorough, and absolutely unwilling to accept less than what's deserved. The presentation continued for another 40 minutes, walking through the specific tactics Sophia had used, the evidence she had gathered, the legal strategies that had proven successful. But the message underneath was simpler. Never underestimate what a woman can do when she's pushed to her limit. After the speech, dozens of attorneys approached Sophia with questions, case studies, requests for consultations. One of them, a young woman just a few years out of law school, waited until the crowd had thinned before approaching. Mrs. Chun, I'm sorry, Ms. Martinez, I just wanted to say thank you. My mother was in a marriage like yours. My father controlled everything, told her she was worthless, hid money. But this was 20 years ago, before your foundation, before your book. She didn't know how to fight back, so she accepted almost nothing in the divorce. We grew up poor while he lived in luxury. Sophia took the young attorney's hand. What's your name? Jennifer. Jennifer Choi. Well, Jennifer Choi, how many women have you helped since you started practicing law? 37 so far. Mostly women in situations like my mom's. Then your mother's pain wasn't for nothing. She survived it, raised you, and now you're helping other women avoid the same fate. That's generational healing. Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. I just wish she had known she could fight back. Now other women know, Sophia said simply. Because of your mother's experience, because of my experience, because of every woman who has survived financial abuse and lived to tell the story. We're changing the narrative. We're teaching women that they don't have to accept cruelty disguised as marriage. That night, Sophia returned to her home. Not the penthouse she had shared with Marcus, but a beautiful Victorian house she had chosen for herself and her children. It was filled with art from her gallery, photographs of Emma and Lucas, mementos from the Foundation's successful cases. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat on her back porch, looking out at the garden she had planted herself. Roses, lavender, jasmine, all her favorites, chosen because she loved them, not because they matched some decorator's vision of what a wealthy person's garden should look like. Her phone buzzed with a text from Diana Torres, her attorney who had become one of her closest friends. Just got the final numbers on the Foundation's impact report. You're going to love this. The report showed that in 5 years, the Martinez Foundation had helped 4,247 women escape financially abusive marriages. The total amount recovered in divorce settlements, $3.2 billion. Money that would have stayed hidden, that would have been stolen from families, that would have allowed abusive men to continue their patterns of control. But more than the money, the report showed something else. An 87% decrease in depression and anxiety among women who had used the Foundation services. 83% had successfully re-entered the workforce. 91% reported feeling safe and financially secure 5 years after their divorces. Those numbers represented real lives changed. Real women who had been told they were nothing and discovered they were everything. Real children who grew up watching their mothers transform from victims to survivors to heroes. Sophia thought about Marcus sometimes, though less and less as years passed. She heard through mutual acquaintances that he had remarried, that he was trying to rebuild his career, that he spoke in therapy about regret and wasted opportunities. She felt neither satisfaction nor sympathy about his circumstances. His life was simply no longer relevant to hers. What mattered now was the work. The next woman walking into the Foundation's office, terrified and desperate. The next artist whose work Sophia would champion. The next speech that might inspire another attorney to fight harder for their clients. The next generation of women who would grow up knowing they didn't have to accept abuse as the price of financial security. Emma was applying to colleges now, writing her application essay about growing up watching her mother build an empire from the ashes of a broken marriage. Lucas was interested in law, inspired by watching the attorneys at his mother's foundation fight for justice. They were good kids, kind kids, strong kids who understood that character mattered more than money, that integrity couldn't be bought, that real success was measured in lives improved rather than dollars accumulated. This was Sophia's victory. Not the courtroom triumph, though that had been satisfying. Not the financial settlement, though that had provided security and opportunity. But this. A life rebuilt on her own terms, children who respected her, work that mattered, and the absolute certainty that she had taken the worst thing that ever happened to her and transformed it into something meaningful. On the 10-year anniversary of that devastating restaurant confrontation, a journalist asked Sophia if she would change anything about her story if she could. Would I choose not to marry Marcus in the first place? Would I avoid all that pain? Sophia considered the question carefully. No, because that pain taught me things I needed to learn. It showed me strengths I didn't know I had. It gave me a purpose that has helped thousands of women. If I erased that experience, I'd erase everything I've built from it. But surely you wish Marcus had been different, that he hadn't betrayed you? Sophia smiled. Not the strategic smile from the restaurant. Not the knowing smile that had confused her ex-husband so completely. But a peaceful smile, the smile of someone who had found contentment in unexpected places. Marcus was exactly who he chose to be, and I became exactly who I needed to be in response. He thought he was destroying me when he said those words in that restaurant. He thought he was humiliating me, breaking me, reducing me to nothing. She paused, looking out the window at the city she had reclaimed as her own. But you know what he actually did? He freed me. He freed me from the illusion that our marriage was salvageable. He freed me from any remaining obligation to protect his reputation. He freed me to become the person I was always meant to be, the person I couldn't be while I was busy playing the role of his perfect wife. So when you smiled at him that night, I smiled because I knew something he didn't. I knew I had already won. I knew that while he was delivering what he thought was a death blow, I had already protected myself and my children. I knew that his moment of triumph was actually the beginning of his complete destruction. Sophia stood up, gathering her things, preparing to return to the life she had built. The foundation, the gallery, the children, the work. Marcus wanted me to feel disgusted with myself. He wanted me to believe I was worthless. He spent years trying to convince me that I was nothing without him. She turned back to the journalist one final time. But the truth is, he was nothing without me. I just didn't realize it until he forced me to leave. And once I was free of him, once I stopped defining myself through his eyes, I discovered exactly how much I was capable of achieving. That's the lesson I want other women to learn. Not from my courtroom victory or my financial settlement, but from the simple truth that you are never as small as someone who needs to control you wants you to believe. You are never as weak as an abuser claims. You are never as worthless as a narcissist insists. You are strong enough to leave, smart enough to plan, capable enough to rebuild, and worthy of so much more than cruelty disguised as love. Sophia Martinez walked out of that interview and into her extraordinary life, carrying with her the knowledge that she had taken her husband's worst insult and transformed it into her greatest triumph. He had meant to destroy her with those words. "You've disgusted me since day one." Instead, he had liberated her. And she had smiled because she understood something that Marcus, in all his arrogance and calculation, had never comprehended. That sometimes the person you think you're destroying is actually the one holding all the power. They just haven't revealed it yet.